Hey there, lifestyle property people, it's Shiv here, and today I'm going to tell you about the worst property that I ever purchased. So this property, first of all, I purchased in 2016, and it was a 4-bedroom property in West Leeds that I purchased. I bought it for £110,000, and what we realised very quickly, this was quite early on in our property career, is that we could convert it reasonably easily into a 6-bedroom HMO. And the way we were going to do that is by converting the basement rooms into actual rooms. So the basement was already there, it was already pretty dry, and that meant that we could just paint the walls basically, or plaster the walls, paint the walls, and have ourselves a little room down there. So all of a sudden, instead of having 4 bedrooms and having a family house, we then had 6 bedrooms, and we could rent each room out for more money than we rented in total, for more money than we rented the whole house out for. So let's say we could rent the whole house out for, I don't know, £650, but we could probably rent each room out for something like £350. And if you have 6 of those, it doesn't take a genius to work out that it's going to be a lot more lucrative if you can do the HMO. However, there was a couple of things that we had to contend with. The first thing is that after buying it for £110,000, it then cost us about £30,000 to do the necessary works to bring it up to the HMO standards. And that meant we were all in for about £140,000, and it still took about, I don't know, 2 or 3 months to do all of those works. We had expected that net rental would be somewhere in the region of £1,000 a month once you've taken off all the costs. And unfortunately, what the net rental actually ends up being at the moment is sort of shy of about £200 a month. So it's not really doing what it's supposed to do, which is why it's the worst property that I ever bought. And why is it not doing what it's supposed to do? Well, here are the couple of things that we've forgot about. The first is that the mortgage interest rate was a lot higher for a HMO than it was a single-let house. So the mortgage interest rate for a single-let house might have been around 2%, 2.5%, and for a HMO ended up costing us about 3.5%. Now, it doesn't sound like a lot, it's only 1% difference, thereabouts, but it's 1% on 2.5%. So there's an extra 33% difference in the actual interest rate, which obviously reduced the amount of rental return that we received on an annual basis. The second return was, second reason was because we had to get a HMO license. In order to be able to rent out HMOs in Leeds and in many other places, the government wants their sort of slice of the fee, slice of the income, and the way they do that is by charging you for a HMO license. And a part of the HMO license means that you have to get you have to adhere to HMO regulations, which means you have to have fire doors in some places, you have to make sure that you have fire protection all the way through it, fire alarms, and a number of other adaptations which you don't need to have for single-let properties. And all of these things do end up costing a bit more. So whilst for a single-let house it might have only cost us £10,000, maybe £15,000 to refurbish it and rent it out, for a HMO it cost us a lot more, somewhere in the region of £30,000. The third reason is because of tenant churn. So something that people don't tell you when you're looking to get into the world of a HMO, a house in multiple occupation, is that the letting agents that run HMOs are incentivized differently from the letting agents that run single-let houses. So here's how a single-let house works, or how the agency works. They're going to collect, let's say, 10% from you from the gross rent every single month. So if your gross rent is £650, they'll collect £65 every single month, and that's a fixed amount. And because that's a fixed amount, what they want to do is have the lowest possible cost. And the way that they have the lowest possible cost is to find the best possible tenants, put them in, and basically not do anything to antagonize them, fix all the problems that they need to get fixed, but keep them in the property, because the longer that they're in the property, the longer that you're going to be able to get rent or get paid your fee for not doing a huge amount of work. On the alternative side, you've got the HMO letting agencies. And some of these HMO letting agencies, what they tend to do is they charge you not just a management fee, but a fee for every time the tenant checks in, every time the tenant checks out, for all of the other bits that are involved in getting tenants in and out. So the deposit protection, the notices that they've got to give out, the inventory checks every single time, and the agency makes a little bit on all of these fees. Unfortunately, what that means is sometimes their they're not incentivized to work in your best interest. Their interests are not aligned with your interests, because ultimately they're going to make money by having more people coming in and out of the property, and that's not actually in line with what is beneficial for you. So we had a lot of tenant churn in that property, and ultimately we always had at least 2 rooms empty. And if always 2 rooms were empty, it means that instead of getting, £1,800 like we thought we were only getting £1,200 or something like that. Now, if you're only getting £1,200, it's still better than £650. But the next point that we need to work into this is the fact that actually we've got to also pay the bills. When you have a HMO, the whole point is they call it frictionless living. And what that ultimately means is that people can move in and they can move out, and they don't need to worry about, signing up to the bills package and paying the individual gas, electric, water, council tax bills. Actually, they can just move in and move out, and they know that the landlord pays for all of the bills included in the property. Now, that has some advantages and some disadvantages. The advantages of paying the bills from a landlord perspective is that you're in charge of the whole thing. You can make sure you never get behind on the bills. The disadvantage of the landlord paying the bills is that obviously, first of all, it comes off the rental income that they're paying you. So although in this example I said that they were actually paying £1,200 a month rather than £650, well, £400 or £500 of that was just bills. So they weren't paying £1,200 anymore. You've got to take off £500 off that. So they're paying £700 rather than paying the £650, which is what I said for the single let house. On top of that, because tenants are no longer paying the bills, guess what? They're going to have their windows open, they're going to have the radiators turned up to the max, and they're not really going to care about energy efficiency and saving energy, and actually not going to care about saving you money on your electricity or gas bill. The next point to mention is that if you have multiple people living in the property rather than just one person or one family, the responsibility for works in that property gets muted. So let's say, for example, there's a little bit of something's gone wrong, there's some maintenance work required in the property, then who's going to report those maintenance work to the agent? Is it going to be me or one of the other 5 people that live in this property? Whereas if I'm living in a single let property and it's just me and my family, well, I'll take it upon myself to make sure I tell the agent about these things, because ultimately it's going to impact me. Likewise, you've also got to think about, bins. If there's 5 people, 6 people living in a house, who's going to empty the bins every week? Most of the time, no one empties the bin, and most of the time you just end up with a huge amount of waste building up in the property. If you have a family, by the same token, you normally have just one person, maybe it's one person or the other person that goes and empties the bin every single week, or they take it in turns, but they make sure it gets done because it's going to impact them otherwise. So it's a really important point to note that actually maintenance works and keeping the property clean and tidy are not something that are on the tenant's highest priorities, and because they're not the tenant's highest priorities, they typically end up not getting done, which ruins obviously the property. The final point about why this property ended up being the worst property that I ever bought was because actually now all of a sudden we've got minimum space standards coming in. Minimum space standards means that before, where you could rent out a property and rent out a room that was a certain square footage, that's changing now. It means that those rooms can no longer be rented out. So in this particular property, 3 out of the 6 rooms that we have can no longer be rented out because they are too small. And so as a result of that, it means our income goes, what we said earlier, from 1,800, it's already gone down to 1,200 and then down to 700, where now actually it might actually go down to like 300 because we can't rent all the rooms out, but we still have to pay the bills and we still have to pay all the management charges and management fees. So actually, when you look at that, you have a single let property that could be rented for £650 a month, or you have a multi-let house, a HMO, house of multiple occupation, which is in actual fact only making you a net amount of say £300, £200 a month. So in the end, what we've done is we've decided to convert that property back into a single let house. It's a no-brainer for us. It was still in for £140,000 thereabouts. It's not a huge amount of money, and we can rent the property out for £650, £750 a month, and it makes a really decent return without any hassle. On the flip side, we could try and manage it as a HMO, but there's a lot of churn, there's a lot of hassle, and we're really not making a huge amount of money on it anyway. So there you go. That tells you a little bit about about the worst property that I bought and what we're doing with it now. It's now been 5 years that I've had that property, and fortunately it's gone up in value like a lot of the other properties in the market, and it means that we're not going to lose out on it, but hopefully you guys can learn from that and don't make the same mistakes that I did. Thanks very much, and speak to you soon. Bye bye.